Before we prepare for our meditation, I'd like to introduce our speaker, our very own Katherine McQuay Lewis. And for many of you who were here last week, you know she became a member of Unity of Washington, D.C. In addition to her day job with the federal government, Katherine McQuay Lewis is a motivational speaker, workshop facilitator, and certified personal and organizational coach. Her focus is on being your best self, and topics include getting out of your own way, living from your highest vision of yourself, and staying in your own lane. She tries to practice these things in her life, as I'm sure many of us do, and occasionally we succeed. Her favorite place to speak is at Unity of Washington, D.C., and we love having her. For our meditation and message today, let's show Katherine some real Unity love.
So good morning. Please turn to your neighbor and tell them it's getting better all the time. And then turn back and tell them because it can't get much worse. Now, a few of you may be old enough to know that's an old Beatles song, right? It's called, the chorus goes, "It's getting better all the time, it can't get much worse." Now, that may seem a little negative to some of you, but I have found that sometimes it's quite helpful for me to realize I've got nowhere to go but up. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, getting through the hard times. And I want to apologize to some of you who may never have been through hard times. Perhaps there's some of you who have never had a dark night of the soul, who have never railed at God in anger or dropped to your knees in despair. And to you, I would say, congratulations. I might also suggest therapy, because there could be a little denial going on. Because we all get our turn, right? No one escapes without it. When I get the wonderful opportunity to speak here, I always try to talk about something I've either dealt with or I am going through. And I have to say that I had a rather rough fall. Things at work were tough for me. An important friendship had ended. Our dog, who is 12 now, was not doing well and is not doing well now. But most importantly, I lost my mother in September. Mom had had a good, long life. She died just 2 weeks shy of her 96th birthday. And she had been in amazing shape until the dementia started about 5 or 6 years before that. So in a lot of ways, I had lost her before I lost her. But still, it was very difficult. So it was a tough time. And I knew all of those events were having an effect on me internally, but I thought externally I was handling them well. That is until Christmas Day, when my 18-year-old son Alex and I were opening our Christmas gifts. And one gift from him was a device to heat essential oils, so you would breathe in the oils and they would calm you. Another gift was a mug with a sloth on it, reminding me to calm down. There was a little wood carving with that famous line that life isn't about avoiding the storms, it's about learning to dance in the rain. And then there was a book on trying to stay centered in difficult times. And Alex said, "You may notice a theme this year. It's stress reduction." So I guess I wasn't handling it as well as I thought. But here's something I learned, that even in the midst of those difficult times, there are still always moments of wonder, moments of great beauty, and sometimes even moments of joy. There were still wonderful things that were happening, and all I had to do was notice them. One thing in particular was that my son Alex was being pretty great during that time. He started his senior year and he really turned things around academically. He was applying to colleges and he did it all on his own. He made up charts and graphs of when things were due and the deadlines, and he was just overall joy to be around. Now don't get too excited because there have been several times over the past couple of months when I've wanted to suggest he might find someplace else to live during his senior year because he's been a bit trying at times, but during that difficult time for me, he really was great. And I hear that same experience from a lot of people, that even in the midst of hard times, God is trying to get your attention. Maybe there's a beautiful sunset. Maybe a neighbor stops by with dinner unexpectedly, or an old friend calls to support you and you spend a few wonderful hours together. It's why in hospices you often hear laughter. Even at what may seem to be the darkest times, there can still be joy, wonderful memories, great feelings of love, and always hope that something better is coming. We just have to be aware enough to see it. I was with a friend this summer, and we were sitting next to a window, and she was talking about how awful everything was. And as she was talking, a cardinal landed on a branch by the window, and he was fluttering and pecking and seemed to be going out of his way to get her attention, like, hello, over here, look at me. That poor bird did everything but handstands to get her attention. But my friend never looked up. God is always sending us cardinals, but sometimes we are too committed to our misery to notice. And we know that two opposing things can be present at the same time: pain and beauty, grief and joy, despair and hope. They are not mutually exclusive. And I don't know about you, but I get 100 times closer to God when I'm going through difficult times. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's the truth. My prayer time increases. I might even resort to meditation. I go right to my spiritual books that help me so much. I play Reverend Sylvia sermons in my car, and I pray and pray and pray. And I feel a connection that I don't always feel when things are going well. There's a Japanese proverb I like: fall 7 times, get up 8. Another thing I think is so important to remember is that everything changes. This too shall pass, and there's a season for everything. Ecclesiastes 3, verses 3 through 5 tells us, to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Marianne Williamson reminds us that everything changes. This too shall pass, whether things are great or whether they are awful. She says that the top of one mountain is always just the bottom of another. It's just another season. Another favorite Marianne Williamson line I love is that without the resurrection, it would have been a whole different story. And I remember that when I'm going through difficult times, that without the resurrection, it'd be a whole different story. John 14, verses 1 through 3 reads, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me as well. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? Everything changes. This too shall pass. And sometimes we can be in the midst of the most horrible situation and things can change overnight. Other times, it's not overnight. Sometimes the change takes a lot longer, but eventually everything changes. It passes. Now, there are times, believe it or not, when the difficult situation is of our own making. And it's our reaction to something that, I promise you, can make things a lot better or a lot worse. Remember I mentioned that Alex had been driving me a bit batty lately? So the other night he told me that he really wanted to stay home from school the next day. He said he was tired, he'd been working so hard, and there wasn't anything he was going to miss if he stayed home. And I said, too bad, so sad, you're going to school tomorrow. And then he started, rah, 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 rah. And he really got to me when he said, you take off from work whenever you want. That flipped my switch. And I said, first of all, I don't, but secondly, I'm the parent, I work for a living, I pay for everything in our lives, and if I want to take off, and then I stopped myself. Because first of all, I remembered if you're explaining, you're losing. And secondly, what was I doing? I am the parent, and allegedly the grown-up. But beyond that, I was making it worse for myself. And you know what would save us all kinds of pain in so many situations? If we would stop talking. Just stop. End it. But you know what else we have to do? Breathe and pray and bring the focus back to our breath and to God and to what is important. I had a situation recently with a friend I used to work with, and we really are friends, but we tend to give each other jabs every now and then. So we were talking about our jobs, and out of the blue, she said, well, I remember how horrible you were at supervising Susie. Everybody in the division was always complaining about it. Yes, she did. Now, let me just mention that Susie had left our office 8 years ago, and my friend was bringing it up. So I went home that night, and I read a few passages from my spiritual books. I reminded myself that I needed to let it go because thinking about it was just giving her free rent in my head, and that I know the secret to all of this is to relax and release, to let go, to pray for her happiness. So then it was a few days later, and she and I were talking again, and something came up about Tom. Now, Tom is someone who had gotten a job that my friend Susie had really wanted a few years ago, but Tom got it. So when his name came up, I may have mentioned that isn't Tom just perfect in that job? Isn't it just great how he exceeded everyone's expectations and was just such a perfect choice for the position? Now, I should not tell you that story because it says nothing good about me. And the thing is, I believe in karma. I know that by saying what I said, I had sealed my own fate, and that negative juju would be coming my way sooner rather than later, and probably sooner. And we reap what we sow, right? There is usually nothing that we cannot make worse. Some of you may know the Buddhist parable of the second arrow, where the Buddha asked the student, if a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful? The student replied, it is. The Buddha then asked, if the person is struck by a second arrow, is that even more painful? The student replied again, it is. The Buddha then explained, in life, we cannot always control the first arrow. However, the second arrow is our reaction to the first. And with the second arrow comes the possibility of choice. The first arrow is the thing that happens. The boss tells you you did a bad job with something. You lose your cell phone. You forget to pay a bill on time. The second arrow is what you then do to yourself. The story you tell yourself. I'm so stupid, or I can never do anything right, or I'm always messing up. That's how we extend the suffering. That's the part we do to ourselves. And it's the second arrow that we can change. When we start to beat ourselves up, we can stop. We can let ourselves off the hook and remind ourselves we are only human. We can say a prayer and we can begin again. But when it comes to the other hard times, the times that are not of our own making, We just have to keep on keeping on. The spiritual writer Anne Lamott writes, big parts of us get broken, of our hearts, minds, and beings. Yet we keep getting up, lurching on. We learn to dance with a limp. The spiritual teacher Pema Chodron writes, let the hard things in life break you. Let them change you. Let this pain be your teacher. The experiences of your life are trying to tell you something about yourself. Don't run away and hide under the covers. What is the storm trying to tell you? What will you learn if you face it with courage, with honesty, and lean into it? And she also writes, nothing ever goes away until it teaches us what we need to learn. I hate that. But until I learn it, I'm going to keep getting the lesson, aren't I? Josh 16, verse 33 reads, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you may have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Something that's helped me a lot when I'm troubled by a particular situation or I don't know what to do is an exercise called the future self. The idea is to access your best future self, that person you're going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now, who has lived longer and knows better, and who is the highest version of yourself. It's accessing a deep inner wisdom that we all carry inside. Maybe I'm struggling with a situation at work, and if I close my eyes and ask God to help me access my future self, first I might realize that I won't even remember the problem I'm struggling with years from now. But I will also get guidance on how to handle the situation. The answer will usually come, and my whole perspective will change. The psychiatrist Nancy Napier writes about this exercise, saying, accessing the future self is like entering a timeless library where you can discover outcomes, possibilities, and ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that are an inherent part of your potential of which you were previously unaware. Sometimes the new information emerges into everyday life slowly and over time. Months or years may pass as you grow into what you might have glimpsed. At other times, you just get it and adopt new states of mind and being instantly. The other thing I find is helpful is to look back and to remember that I have been carried through every rough time I have been through. Every struggle, every problem, every difficult situation, God has been beside me, above me, below me, inside of me, and has carried me through. And I can use that to get through whatever is in front of me now. And we know that there are always going to be tough times, right? There's a line that says, God promises a safe landing, but not necessarily a calm passage. But until the change happens, it is really important to practice acceptance. And acceptance isn't saying we like what's happening or that we want it to continue, but it is saying I acknowledge that this is how it is for now. And that doesn't mean I can't leave the situation or I can't work to make it better, but it does mean I stop fighting against what is, because the pain is in the resistance. Fighting against what is a fool's errand. Now, if we really want to get good at this, we can go one better than acceptance, and that's serenity. And I heard a great story recently that showed the difference between the two. You know when you're in the express line at the grocery store and the sign says 12 items or less? And you look at the person in front of you and you start counting and he has 20. Acceptance is acknowledging it is what it is. You don't like it, it's not fair, but you turn your cell phone on, you check your text messages. That's acceptance. But serenity is not counting in the first place. And boy, sometimes I think I'd have to turn into Mother Teresa to be that person. But I have to tell you, I long to be that person. Live and let live. Because to do any otherwise only causes suffering to ourselves, right? Here's the thing. We can usually deal with whatever is going on in the moment. The problem comes when we get stuck in the past and keep going over and over in our minds what happened. Or we get stuck in the future and worrying about what's going to happen. And of course, we usually imagine those terrifying scenario, right? That's the scenario our ego minds default to. But if we stay in the moment, we're okay. If we ask ourselves, where are my feet? What color is my shirt? Get anchored in the present moment, because right now, in this moment, we are okay. Jeremiah 29, verse 11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Isn't that great? Everything changes. God will either change the situation, or he will change me, or he will change my experience of the situation. This too shall pass. Joshua 1 verse 9 reads, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Whatever painful thing is happening in our lives, Emmett Fox reminds us, God is so much bigger. Fox writes that we can say, "But if I don't get the money by Tuesday, the bank is going to foreclose on my house." And Fox says, God can give you the money on Friday and it will still be okay. Or the doctor says the operation must take place this week, but God is in charge, so the operation can happen the following week and it will all be perfect. God is bigger than anything else we have to deal with. Remember the line that tells us it is only in the darkness that you can see the stars. God is prepared to do amazing things in our lives, and we will not be in any situation where God is not. God will make a way where there is no way. And when you think you have reached the end of your rope, that's where you will find God. There's another line that says, if you saw the size of the blessing coming, then you would understand the magnitude of the battle you are fighting. If we could only see what's coming and what's in store for us, we could relax and trust. And one of my favorite lines from Dylan Thomas, life always offers a second chance. It's called tomorrow. And one last thing to remember, your track record through getting through bad times is 100% because you're here now, right? You've made it. I wish you joy and acceptance in this moment, knowing that in this moment all is well and all will be well. And I wish you joy for the promise of tomorrow, because God will be there tomorrow too. Thank you.